Why is it that when you ignore her, she doesn't just move on like you expect? Instead, something much more dangerous happens in her mind. And what I'm about to reveal will completely change how you see the power of silence in relationships. But here's the thing. Most people think they understand what happens when they pull away from someone. They think it's simple. They think it's straightforward. They're dead wrong. And by the end of this video, you'll know exactly why your silence creates the opposite effect of what you intended. Before I tell you what she's really thinking, I need you to understand something crucial about the human brain. Because without this foundation, nothing else I'm about to share will make sense. And trust me, you don't want to miss this part. The human brain has a fatal flaw when it comes to silence. It cannot leave empty spaces unfilled. When you stop communicating, when you become distant, when you choose silence over explanation, her brain doesn't interpret this as indifference. It interprets it as a puzzle that must be solved. But here's where it gets dangerous. The stories her mind creates to fill that silence are never neutral. They're never kind. And they're setting up a chain reaction that you probably never intended. Now, I know what you're thinking. You're thinking that silence gives you power, that distance creates attraction, that pulling away makes her want you more. And sometimes, in the very beginning, that might be true. But there's a darker side to this strategy that no one talks about. When you ignore her, the first thing that happens is she starts questioning herself, not you. Herself. She starts thinking that maybe she said something wrong, maybe she was too available, maybe she revealed too much too quickly. But this is just the beginning, because what happens next is where things get really complicated. Her mind starts rewinding every conversation you've had, every text exchange, every moment of connection. She's searching for the exact point where things changed, the exact word or action that might have caused you to pull away. And here's the part that will shock you. She's not doing this to understand you better. She's doing this to figure out how to fix herself. This is where the psychology gets really dark. When you ignore someone, you're not just withholding communication. You're forcing them to have a conversation with their deepest insecurities. You're making them question their worth, their value, their place in your life. But there's something even more sinister happening that you need to understand. Something that connects to every relationship she's ever had. When you ignore her, you're not just dealing with her response to you. You're triggering every memory of every person who ever used silence as punishment. Every relationship where she had to decode absence to understand where she stood. This is why your silence hits differently than you think it does. It's not just about you and her. It's about every time someone made her feel like she had to earn attention, like she had to prove her worth through perfect behavior. Now, here's where this gets really important, because what I'm about to tell you explains why some people become obsessed when you ignore them, while others just walk away. The difference comes down to something psychologists call attachment patterns. And depending on her attachment style, your silence is creating one of three very different responses in her mind. If she has an anxious attachment style, your silence is confirming her worst fears, that she's too much, that she's not enough, that love is conditional and she's failing to meet the conditions. But if she has an avoidant attachment style, your silence is actually validating her belief that getting close to people is dangerous, that vulnerability leads to abandonment, that she was right to keep her walls up. And if she has a secure attachment style, well, that's where things get interesting, because she's probably not thinking what you expect her to be thinking at all. The secure person looks at your silence and thinks one thing, that you're not capable of healthy communication, that you're dealing with your emotions in a way that's harmful to both of you, that maybe this relationship isn't what she thought it was. But here's the twist that changes everything. The thoughts I just described, they're just the surface level, because underneath all of this, there's a deeper psychological process happening that most people never recognize. When you ignore her, you're not just affecting her thoughts about you, you're affecting her thoughts about love itself. You're teaching her that relationships require constant analysis. That silence is a language she needs to learn to speak. That love comes with codes that need to be cracked. This is the hidden damage of using silence as a strategy. It doesn't just create distance in the moment. It creates patterns of thinking that can last years. It teaches her that communication is dangerous, that vulnerability leads to abandonment, that she needs to be perfect to be worthy of attention. And here's the part that will really surprise you. The longer you ignore her, the more her brain starts protecting itself. It starts building walls that have nothing to do with you and everything to do with surviving the confusion you've created. She starts thinking that maybe she doesn't need someone who communicates through absence. Maybe she deserves someone who can use words instead of silence. Someone who can express their needs instead of expecting her to guess them. This is where your silence strategy backfires completely. Because instead of making her want you more, it starts making her question whether she wants you at all. But there's one more layer to this that you absolutely need to understand, because this is where psychology meets reality in a way that changes everything. When you ignore her, you're not just changing how she thinks about you. You're changing how she thinks about herself in relationships. You're teaching her that love requires mind reading. That connection comes with tests she didn't know she was taking. And once she learns these lessons, they don't just apply to you, they apply to every relationship she has after you. Every person she meets has to deal with the walls your silence helped build. This is the real cost of ignoring someone you care about. It's not just about the relationship you're in. It's about the relationship patterns you're creating that will follow her long after you're gone. So what does she really think when you ignore her? She thinks that maybe she's been approaching love all wrong. Maybe relationships aren't supposed to require this much analysis. Maybe she's supposed to be with someone who doesn't make her question her worth through the simple act of not responding. The solution isn't to stay in constant communication when you need space. The solution is to communicate about needing space, to turn your silence into words, your absence into explanation, your distance into dialogue about why distance is necessary. Because when you ignore her, you're not creating mystery, you're creating confusion. You're not building attraction, you're building anxiety. You're not gaining power, you're losing the opportunity for real connection. And in the end, that's what she's really thinking when you ignore her. She's thinking that maybe she deserves better than someone who communicates through absence,